Good morning, everybody. My name's Lisa Reichert. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the career and professional development lead within the People and Organization Development team at UC Berkeley's People and Culture Department. I am also the co-chair of this year's NOW conference, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for today's session. And also providing support today are my awesome pod colleagues, Ying Kwa, who's also our NOW conference co-chair, and Elizabeth Storer, our NOW planning committee member. And I have the pleasure of welcoming you all to Sage Wisdom, Discover, Explore, and Innovate for a More Positive Life, presented by Dvorit Mausner. Today marks the fifth and final day of NOW Week. So this has been 5 days of personal and professional development to support your career at any stage of your journey. And we hope that you have enjoyed the workshops, the coaching sessions, the conversations throughout this week. And for those of you who attended the NOW conference yesterday, we hope you were really engaged and made some new connections and are leaving with inspiration. And today's session is a wonderful way to wrap up everything. And so with that, I'm delighted to introduce our presenter, Dvorit Mausner. Dvorit is the founder of Good Question Coach, and she helps individuals, pairs, and groups of all kinds master relationship skills to align and thrive at work and at home. Her background includes 20 years of leadership across sectors, industries, and organizations. She advises entrepreneurs, businesses, supports initiatives, and communities. Dvorit studied behavioral science, social justice, and business at the University of Pennsylvania and Wharton. Her accredited coach training is in organization and relationship systems coaching and positive intelligence. And she's also the founder of Temescal Brewing, the favorite brewery beer garden of North Oakland here in California. Dvorit is pronounced Dvorit, like more sweet. Let's give a sweet welcome to Dvorit.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was such a warm introduction, and thank you so much for your support throughout this process. I'd like to welcome everybody. I'm feeling very enthusiastic to be with all of you today and to offer this introduction to positive intelligence and what we'll call today Sage Power. I was so delighted to see that the theme of the NOW conference this year was Discover, Explore, and Innovate, because explore and innovate are key elements of positive intelligence. So I look forward to teaching you more about these principles and ways to live a more positive life. We have heard a little bit about my background already. Today, I'll be focusing on one of the coaching modalities that I really love and have found has had a major impact on my life as well, and that's positive intelligence. And because I have a background in neuroscience, today we'll get a little bit under the hood of our minds and learn a little bit about the neurological origins of positivity. And I really love taking abstract concepts and turning them into something actionable. So hopefully that's what you'll take away today. I also just want to briefly mention that I worked for many years for the University of Pennsylvania in the Development and Alumni Relations Department. So if there are any advancement professionals in the room, I was once one of you. So a special shout out to those folks in the room today. So we have 3 goals today. One is to discover how negativity shows up in the brain and learn about the neurological origins of positivity. Then we'll learn 2 tools. These tools will help us shift our mindset. And it's important that we practice these over time. So I'll leave you with them. And then the idea is you continue to use these tools in your own life. And once we've accomplished both this discovery and the exploration of these 2 tools, you'll leave with this felt sense of sage power. So sage power is a different way to think about personal growth, and it's rooted in science and these accessible practices that I'll share with you today. Ultimately, this presentation is about how to handle challenges in your life with more clarity and resilience for a more positive life. So we'll start today with a little bit of discovery, and this is going to be all about the origin of positivity through the modality of positive intelligence. Positive intelligence is a coaching universe that incorporates the best practices of neuroscience, performance science, positive psychology, and cognitive psychology. And it offers us a different way to understand our reactions and our choices in life. Ultimately, with positive intelligence, we get healthy, aligned relationships, improved performance, and wellness at home and at work. So we'll start with a little bit about what's going on in the brain, and we'll discover how positivity is actually wired into us. So many of you are probably familiar with our human brain and the idea that it's completely divided, almost completely divided, into two hemispheres. There's very little connective tissue between the two hemispheres of our brain. So you'll hear people talk about being left-brained and right-brained. And we know that these are simplifications, but in reality, there's a lot of truth to having two sides of the brain that operate independently for the most part. And neither side is good nor bad. The idea here is we're adaptive and we use both sides of our brain depending on our nature, our nurture, our circumstance. Positive intelligence, which we'll talk about today, helps us choose which side of our mind is in the driver's seat. And it orients us towards using our right brain more often. Well, why is that? So let's start with our left brain. Our left brain works very closely with our brain stem and what's known as our limbic system. And these are the primitive functions of our brain. So primitive life was all about survival. You had to survive over predators and enemies and weather. And this is where we get our fight, flight, or freeze reactions from the left side of our brain and from our limbic system. So when we're working with the left side of our brain, we're in a survival mode. And what comes up are danger responses, negative biases, survival functions. These are the origins of our emotions like fear, blame, stress, anger, guilt, shame, avoidance, control, doubt. None of that sounds very positive to me. What happens when we're in our left brain, when we're in our survival brain, when we're in our primitive brain, we're narrowing our vision, both literally and figuratively. So we're focused on language, linear logical thinking, day-to-day details, perfectionism, many things that relate to short-term outcomes. We just need to survive. The left brain is known as our rational brain. It's our detail-oriented brain. And the problem from operating from our left brain is our left brain doesn't have a lot of wisdom. It's not very present. It gets lost in the weeds. So the truth is that when we are operating from our left brain, we're not in a position of leadership. The left brain is a really good servant. And the challenge that we face is that in modern society, we're often forced to operate from the left side of our brain. There is perpetual distress and anxiety. And unfortunately, our health suffers. People have high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease, diminished immunity, reduced longevity. The left brain is continually exercised and rewarded and strengthened because of the stressors of modern society. So we tend to stay in this negative space. And being in this negative space distances us from empathy, curiosity, creativity, clarity. When we operate from the left side of our brain, we have reduced happiness, we have reduced wellness, we have reduced performance. And oftentimes, this is a very individualistic way to live. That's the survival side. That's the left side of the brain. So what happens when we look at the right side of the brain? What's going on there? Well, it turns out that the right side of our brain is much more focused on resilience. It works closely with the middle prefrontal cortex and what's known as an empathy network. The right side of our brain allows us to have self-observation, reflective pausing, self-soothing. We can stay centered and feel a gut wisdom when we're operating from the right side of our brain. We have a big picture perspective. We see in images non-verbally. We're also aware of our energy and mood and sensations and emotions and relationships. The right side of the brain is much more interested in connectivity. We have curiosity, peace, calm, creativity, passion, clarity, We feel opportunity, discovery, joy, meaning. I think you're starting to get the sense that these hemispheres are quite different. When we're operating from the right side of our brain, we tend to turn challenges into opportunities, and we don't feel the need to avoid them. We want to solve them. We have a long-term focus on success and happiness. So the right side of our brain allows us to be very present, and it allows us to be in touch with our body, our sensations, and we feel interconnected. So oftentimes you'll hear people talk about mindfulness. Mindfulness is the key to nirvana or whatever they say. And the truth is that mindfulness and somatic work as well, they're tapping into this right brain, this resilient side of the brain. One of the favorite facts I have about this is we talk about having shower thoughts, how we're so brilliant in the shower. Why is that? Well, when we're in the shower, we're able to be in a calm space with a somatic experience of feeling the water all over our body. And this allows us to have an expansiveness of creative thought. And so shower thoughts actually come from a scientific notion that our right brain allows us to be creative and thoughtful and mindful. And perhaps that's why sometimes our best thoughts come when we're in that resilient brain space. So interestingly, it's not just the two hemispheres of our brain. There's actually also two neural networks that add some nuance to the left and right brain story. One of these networks is called the default mode network, the DMN. That's represented here in blue. We also have the task positive network, which is represented here in yellow. These are different areas of the brain that interact and light up during different times of thought and activity. So the DMN, the blue, it's a reactive network. It's interconnected with the amygdala and, again, our primitive limbic system. So we heard this before. This is involved in regulating our emotional response, but it gets hijacked in stressful moments. So when we're feeling stress, we're very reactive. And what happens is we get that fight or flight response. And the more that we're in fight or flight, the deeper the connection is between this network and our amygdala. And what happens then? We experience more anxiety. So this network of neurons creates emotional reactivity, internal dialogue, mind wandering, intrusive thoughts, ruminative chatter. Have you ever thought about something again and again and again and again and you cannot stop it? That's actually a core symptom of major depressive disorder, which can be linked back to this network of neurons. It's self-referential thinking, it's self-criticism, it's judging our past actions or the things we didn't do, it's rehashing past conversations. From this network, we experience guilt and shame over our perceived failings. However, we have another network. The TPN here in yellow is our reflective network. It lights up when we're solving problems, planning, taking action in the world, when we have focused attention, when we're problem solving. When we are mindful and in control, this is the network that lights up. It represents a psychological state of attention and awareness to what's happening in the present moment. So mindfulness, it requires that we engage in self-regulation of our attention, our emotion, our cognition. If any of you are meditators, you are working on strengthening your TPN, this positive network of neurons. Meditators have more control and they shift back more easily to focus. And they benefit from even brief practice, which is why I'll encourage you today to practice some of the tools that I'll teach. Oftentimes our attention teeter-totters back and forth, but those with a strong reflective neural network are predisposed to attend more to what we're experiencing in the present moment in a non-judgmental way. And those people exhibit lower levels of stress. Sounds pretty positive to me. So if blue is survival and reactive, and yellow is resilient and reflective, we see that we have two somewhat competing sides of our mind that are pulling us in different directions. And it turns out that as kids, we actually have a pretty good balance. But the logical left becomes more used in adulthood, and the right side, the resilient side, actually starts to atrophy. So adulthood puts us in these patterns where we feel stuck in a reactive survival mode. So let me pause there. I want all of you to think of a time recently when you feel like you were stuck in reactivity and ask yourself, what might have shifted if you had had more access to your reflective brain? Would you rather be resilient and reflective? What would it mean to have a more positive life by being resilient and reflective? What would it mean to have a life with more ease and flow? Some people will say, I think it's good to be negative. And I used to be that kind of person. When I used to have negative thoughts, I wanted to stew in them, and it harmed some of my relationships. The reality is having a negative thought is like when a tea kettle goes off. It's sending you an alarm, and it says something is wrong here. But then you have a choice. Do you leave the tea kettle on the stove and let it continue to send the alarm? Or do you turn the stove off and you say, thank you for that alarm. Now I need to do something about this situation. Sometimes we can get in the habit of letting the kettle whistle for a long time, but then what happens? We stay in a negative mind space. And what we just learned is staying in a negative mind space removes us from interconnectedness, creativity, ease, and flow. So we want to learn to switch into the positive mind space of resilience. The negative part of our brain is like a critic. Wouldn't you rather work with the part of your brain that's like a coach? So here I'll introduce the sage brain. What we have when we're in our sage brain, our yellow side of the brain, is a downregulation of the negative neural networks and an upregulation of the positive neural networks that allow us for improved cognitive control. This is generally where we have positive thought patterns. And when we practice them consistently, and we use different exercises to improve our ability to regulate our attention, our emotion, and our cognitive functions, we find that we have fewer negative thought patterns. Our mind doesn't wander. We're able to train our brain to be more sage-like. The brain has plasticity, no matter how old we are, and we can exercise our sage brain to strengthen it over a relatively short amount of time. And this is the brain's answer to a more positive life. But we're often stuck in these habits of negativity. So let's reflect for a minute, and this is a chance for all of you to please participate. Think about something personal that feels negative that's on your mind right now. Let's call this your negative narrative, and we'll return to it a few more times. So, where in your life are you holding on to negative feelings? Let's pick a relatively small or medium issue that we can give some thought to in a short amount of time. Something at work, something at home, in your community, but something relatively small, but you're noticing that you're holding on to some negativity. Something personal about which your thoughts and feelings are negative, something that's bad in your perspective. So take a moment. Hopefully you have a pen and paper nearby or a note tool on your computer somewhere, and write out your negative narrative, a sentence or two. Who or what is the problem? What's the cause and effect? What is it that you're experiencing negatively these days? Let's take just a minute and just write out a note or two. So in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving. When you have this negative narrative in mind, I'm curious to ask you if you are judging someone for their faults. It could be you, could be others, your circumstances. If you notice that judgment, blame, or guilt is coming up for you, I want you to put into the chat, who are you judging, blaming, or guilting? Is it you, others, or circumstances? Just type that into the chat. You, others, circumstances. And while you're typing that into the chat, you're noticing where that blame is going towards you, others, your circumstances. I'll just note that we often take our negative narratives and we assign judgment. This is because humans love order and rationalization. And this is our negative brain, not our sage brain in action. When we judge or blame or assign guilt, we're actually looking for short-term resolution, like a little band-aid. It's your fault. I'm done. But that doesn't lead to long-term happiness. The everyday voices in our head that generate negative emotions are representing automatic patterns in our mind for how we think and feel and respond. These are the quick fixes. These negative thoughts, these blaming thoughts, are in positive intelligence parlance what we call your saboteurs. When we listen to our saboteurs, we're feeling stress, anxiety, self-doubt, frustration, restlessness, unhappiness. These voices of blame and other voices are sabotaging your performance, your well-being, and your relationships. So, when we judge, we're listening to a particular saboteur. I'd like to introduce you to the judge, the master saboteur. This is the saboteur that affects everybody. Everybody has a judge, everybody. And our judges beat us up over our own mistakes and shortcomings or the mistakes and shortcomings of others. They tell us when things aren't good. Our judges wake us up with worry in the middle of the night and get us fixated on what's wrong with others or our lives. And in positive intelligence, there are 9 additional saboteurs that we learn about through the program. And these are just our inner critics that, again, they create stress and doubt and avoidance and anxiety and disconnection. Saboteurs are causing unhappiness. They're reducing our effectiveness and they harm our relationships. But saboteurs are not who you are. They are our conditioned patterns that are wired over time. They are coming from that negative brain space. The challenge is once something negative has happened, there's really no value in being upset about something over a long period of time, leaving the kettle on the stove, continuing to whistle. But that's how we've been habituated. So sometimes we inadvertently keep that alarm going and then we get overwhelmed by negativity and that distracts us from our performance and wellness and happiness. Negativity is restricting our ability to problem solve. It's keeping us from the right side, the sage side of our brain. So it's a form of self-sabotage. And when we stay in negative emotions, that hurts our ability to see clearly and respond with empathy and curiosity and creativity and action. So the good news is we have a choice. We can actually choose to approach life from the sage perspective, even with the judge in our heads. We can learn to lessen the influence of the judge and other saboteurs by noticing them, which is just the first step. When you notice it and you say, aha, that's my judge talking, it helps reduce the charge of the judge. We're not trying to remove the judge. It's important. It sends us a signal. It says something negative is happening. We don't want to get rid of our alarm bells. We just don't want them ringing forever. So we want to reduce the power of the judge and other saboteurs over us. We want to be able to shift when we see it from the saboteur side of our brain, the negative side of our brain, the reactive side, to the resilient sage side of our brain. So the first step is just noticing when we're being judgmental and then deciding that we'd rather be in a sage mindset so that we can see clearly and respond well. When we shift to the sage side, we have calm and clarity, objectivity, and focused action to handle our challenges. And this contributes to long-term happiness, wellness, success. So what if we had empathy for ourselves and others and our circumstances? What if we felt more agency about our circumstances? When something negative happens, we can catch our judge and we can make sure that the judge doesn't become a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's no sustaining value in staying upset. Instead, we shift towards our sage mindset, and that allows us to access the empathy we need for others and our curiosity and our creativity. And then we can move to laser-focused action. So we'll shift soon to talking about two tools, those tools that will increase our curiosity and our creativity. And those tools get us to move from our negative brain into our sage brain. So if instead of blaming, we had clarity, resilience, and action, shifting into our sage brain gives us access to positive emotions, peace and calm, clear-headed focus, seeing the big picture, and ultimately ease and flow. That's the promise of the positive intelligence way. Then we move towards action with clarity and resilience. But this takes practice. So I'll introduce you to two tools that can reinforce the SAGE approach to challenges. And that's where we'll shift to the next section of our presentation, SAGE tools. So these are tools I want you to practice. You'll learn them today and you'll take them home with you. And the result of using these tools is long-term success and sustained happiness. So we'll talk about explore and innovate. Explore. Most of us draw conclusions, we devise solutions, we take actions before we adequately understand a situation. Exploration is necessary. It helps us understand a problem or a situation more deeply. It gives us a better path forward. So let me tell a story. Imagine that there were 4 blindfolded people who came across an elephant. And they're each touching different parts of the elephant, and they're blindfolded, and each one is convinced that they know what they're touching based on their own unique experience. They're convinced. So one of them is touching the trunk of the elephant, and they say, oh, this is a big snake. I can tell because it's relatively smooth and scaly and long, and it's a snake. And another one is holding the leg of the elephant and says, this is a tree. I know it's a tree because it's thick and stable and round and strong. And another one is feeling the tail and says, well, it's got some fur on the end and it's flapping, so it must be a broom. It's sweeping. I found a broom. And so forth and so on. And each person is convinced that they know what they're touching, but none of them are experiencing the big picture. So the challenge here is that our human brain does not like ambiguity or randomness. We form images and opinions of things that maybe don't even exist, and then we just lock in and we hold on to it. And that's how our minds work. So once we've decided that we know something, we limit our exploration, and then we just continue to confirm our existing viewpoint. We avoid discovering more, especially if it could challenge what we think our viewpoint is already. So for example, have you ever been frustrated when you're arguing with someone and it's so obvious they are only listening selectively to what helps their own argument? Or sometimes we think we're exploring and being curious, but the truth is that we've been very narrowed by our saboteurs. We're not in explore mode. We're not using explore as a pure standalone step. We're too busy trying to anticipate the next thing and maneuvering to win an argument. We don't let our sage brain explore. The judge has us look only for what proves the other person wrong. And then we judge ourselves, we judge others, we judge our circumstances. And the judge in our mind is certain of the truth and says, I already know everything. And so we completely torpedo our ability to discover anything new or relevant before we just move on to a solution or an action. We miss out on discovering the most transformational and important stuff. The sage approach is to ask, what else might be true? What else might be here? I feel this tree trunk, but what else might be true? To harness our sage, we use the tool of explore to discover the fuller truth. It's like having childlike energy and emotion for curiosity, openness, wonder, fascination. When you have a strong sage mind, you can activate this exploration and mindset even during a crisis. So while the explore mode is important for looking at new challenges, I also want to mention it's also critical for learning from our past failures and mistakes. So not just something to do at the onset, but something to do afterwards. It's a great postmortem tool. We often avoid exploring our mistakes and failures because the judge makes it too painful, too contentious. We don't want to look. But the sage would be curious about the powerful discoveries of self that are made in the explore mode. So the way to actually use the explore tool is by being a curious anthropologist. The explore tool embraces a beginner's mind. We have to have deep curiosity. And from that, we feel fascination, openness, awe, wonder, very positive mood states. So ask yourself when you're ready to explore, what can I discover? Do I understand what's important before concluding or deciding or acting? Or in relationship to our past story, if this were one part of the elephant, what other parts might I be missing? Explore is a tool that puts you in the seat of an anthropologist and you become a keen observer and discoverer of what is. The anthropologist does not selectively filter information. You're not looking for your desired outcome. The only goal is to discover things exactly as they are. So, for example, if you're in conflict with someone, could you, for even 3 minutes, let go of your own grievances and demands? Could you become fascinated with discovering why the other person is feeling or thinking what they're telling you? Fascination, curiosity. What if you wanted to discover more of the elephant without fear, without any agenda? What if the discovery is its own reward and nothing is needed after that? What if you could feel and say, wow, and be as curious as a child is? That's the power of the explore tool. So let's go back to your negative narrative that you wrote before. Now you have the elephant fable in mind. Now you are a curious anthropologist. Take a moment and jot down a few more notes. Ask yourself, what part of the elephant might I be missing? What happens when you apply a curious lens? What else might be important to know before arriving at a conclusion, decision, or action? Where might much deeper understanding and exploration of the issue have the biggest possible impact? And maybe you notice your judge. How might that judge have been limiting your exploration? Do you have any fear of what you might discover? Any fear that's holding you back from asking questions? Could you start to explore the negative narrative without fear of what that discovery might lead you to? If the tool of explore is resonating for you, feel free to drop something into the chat. The question is, what's happening for you now? What are you noticing? What does the explore tool give you access to? If you have something to share, feel free to drop it into the chat. Next, we'll move on to our tool of Innovate. Innovate is all about invention. This tool is used when your negative narrative needs a solution or a new idea, but you just haven't thought of it yet. You feel kind of stuck. Now, if the solution is obvious, you don't need innovation. Just do the thing. But when the old way of approaching a situation isn't working, or there isn't a more obvious way of dealing with something, innovation is the tool. It could mean producing new solutions. It could mean listing out options for next steps to take. It could also mean coming up with explanations. Whatever your negative narrative would need to come to a resolution, that's where you'll use the power of Innovate. So the challenge here is that our judge sees what's wrong, not what's right, about each idea or situation. So we self-sabotage by closing off our thinking and creating a tunnel vision. And we stay in stress and blame, and we say things like, well, I have to, or it'll never work, or this is all wrong. Our judge is certain there's no better idea. And that's closed thinking. That's inside the box with the lid closed, closed thinking. Sometimes we think we're brainstorming, but we're actually just listening for ideas to shut down. So we want to shift into the practice of open thinking. To move into our sage mind, we ask creatively, what's another idea? And another? That's open thinking. Open thinking taps into our creativity, which lives in our sage brain. So when we're feeling like we're in our sage brain, our mind is open to possibility and problem solving, interconnectedness, ease, and flow. This is where we come up with out-of-the-box solutions. So if explore is about seeing what is, innovate is about imagining what isn't yet. Asking, what's a completely new way to do this? We all operate with invisible boxes all around us, and we have assumptions and habits and limiting beliefs. And many of them are created by our saboteurs, and we don't examine them. If we approach problems with logic and left brain reasoning, we stay inside our walls. We're just moving around the same box. True innovation requires sage thinking to step outside of those limitations entirely. So one way to protect your sage brain from judge interference and saboteur interference is this. Generate as many ideas as possible and don't evaluate them as you go. Evaluation is the way the saboteurs come in through the back door. Your judge comes in and shuts down creativity before it can even begin. But we want creativity to amplify our experience of problem solving. So this can apply whether you're by yourself or in a group. In a group, people are often afraid of feeling judged or looking foolish. And internally, the judge might say about your own ideas, they're dumb or impractical, and then you'll just stop generating new ideas. So here's what I recommend. With the tool of innovation, you make an internal promise that says, I want to come up with rapid fire ideas with no judgment and no attachment. The goal of the Innovate tool is quantity over quality, because high quality ideas emerge from volume. It's like feeding a fire. If you keep tossing sparks, one of them will catch, and you only need one of them to catch. Someone might only need to find 10% of what you said practical and correct to run with it. So don't focus on obvious or existing ideas. This is about expanding your perspective without judgment. The tool of innovation is about building momentum without clinging to any one idea. You focus on what's right about each idea, not what's wrong. And you let go of each idea while building upon it. You can do both at once. So here's how we use the Innovate tool to keep the sage in charge. There's two rules here. One is, and I already mentioned it, it's the 10% rule. Every idea, no matter how wacky, is at least 10% useful, and every person is at least 10% right. So in a brainstorm, every idea that comes, you say, what I like about that idea is, even if it's a totally bizarre idea, what 10% of it resonates? And then use the second rule to build upon it, which is a rule many of you have probably heard and perhaps used before. It comes from improv, and the tool is yes and. So you say, what I like about this idea is, and you add to it. You feed it with the next idea that pops into mind, however impractical. With this approach, the 10% rule and the yes and rule, every idea gets appreciated, reshaped, and passed forward. You keep the game fast, playful, open. That's where innovation lives. And when we practice innovation, we feel joy, excitement, playfulness, spontaneity, creativity. It's a lot better than negativity and judgment with closed thinking, and that's the world in which we typically operate. Instead, the sage mind gives us ease and flow, and we should tap into it, especially when a situation feels hard. That's the power of innovation. So let's go back to your negative narrative. When you think about a possible solution or what your next step could be about the negative narrative you wrote down earlier, does it feel hard? How could you benefit from the playful, spontaneous creativity of Innovate? Has your judge been stopping you from innovation? If you are locked in conflict with someone, what is the 10% truth of the other person's position? If these questions resonate, jot down some notes. Or if you're starting to think of solutions to your negative narrative, but you don't know what to do yet, practice yes and. Start with any idea and then ask, what did I like about that idea? And then, what's another idea? And don't evaluate them. Just generate as many ideas as you can and don't overthink it. Later, you can decide how to navigate through your challenge. But the idea of innovation is quantity and eventually quality. As you're thinking about your negative narrative and the power of the Innovate tool, I'm curious, what's happening for you now? Do you feel like there's something you want to share about your experience learning about Innovate? Feel free to drop it into the chat. This takes us to Sage Power. Sage Power is all about understanding your Sage brain and then practicing Sage tools to give you Sage Power. This isn't about being happy and positive all the time. This is about being resilient and being intentional in the ways that we respond to challenges. So we started by understanding the negativity that we feel, the saboteurs that speak to us. And the saboteurs offer us conditional happiness, short-term success. We are emotionally reactive when we are operating from a saboteur headspace. This is how most of us operate all the time. But then, I've offered a few tools today. First, we remember to catch our saboteurs. Aha, that's my judge. I was being judgmental. That was my judge. Identifying and catching our saboteurs is the first step. Awareness. One of my favorite phrases is name it to tame it. Name the judge. Then our two tools help us increase curiosity and develop creativity. These two tools are not one and done. They are practices we build over a lifetime, and we get better. And our brains have plasticity. So as we learn through these tools to see things in a creative and more expansive way, then we start to find ourselves operating more often in our Sage mindset. Having Sage power is not about suppressing your emotions. It's about developing the ability to choose your response. And that ability to choose how you respond gives us sustained happiness, long-term success, mindfulness, calm, ease, and flow. When we access the Sage side of our brain, we can live a more positive life. So we've talked about brain function, reactive habits, and some tools for having real-time shifts in our lives. And again, it's not about perfection, it's about practice. So I hope what you'll take away today is you can learn to utilize your Sage power, and this will change your internal experience and the way that you show up in the world with more peace. Having Sage power means having a clear, focused mindset, resilience to challenges, achieving your peak performance without sacrificing your well-being, strengthened empathy, more collaborative and healthy relationships. So I would ask, is this the sounds of a more positive life that you would want for yourself? If that's the case, then I want to invite you to continue learning about positive intelligence and other modalities that I love to use in my coaching. First, you'll have a group activity next. So I've offered some discussion prompts that relate to discover, explore, and innovate. Discover was all about the neurological origins of positivity. Explore is increasing open-minded curiosity. And innovate is out-of-the-box creativity. I also want to offer a gift, which is if anyone is curious to learn more about positive intelligence, saboteurs, the judge, and the 9 accomplice saboteurs, and to understand the ways in which you might be self-sabotaging and staying in a saboteur negative headspace, there is a free assessment that is linked here. Feel free to take it. And if you forward your results to me, I would be happy to schedule a complimentary session with you to just talk about what you discover and deepen your insights about positive intelligence. So if this sparked something for you, if today's presentation resonated, I'd love to talk to you or your team more, and I would do it complimentary, my gift to UC staff. There's also an 8-week program. Positive intelligence goes very deep in all the ways that you can shift towards a sage mindset. Today, I taught you 2 tools. There are more and lots of new ideas to discover about sage positivity. I want to close just by saying thank you. It's been a joy to create this presentation for the NOW conference. Please feel free to reach out to me. My email is here. My website and newsletter are at my website. And I coach individuals, pairs, teams, organizations, families, and groups. And today it was, again, my pleasure to be here to coach and teach for the UC staff for the NOW conference. So thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. And we've left a little bit of time for questions. So I would love to turn it back over to Lisa to help us with some moderation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dori, for sharing your sage wisdom and really just like introducing us to many tools and a mindset for openness and curiosity. And yeah, we do have some time left. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves or share in the chat. Let's see. Court asked, could we see the group coaching slide again?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. And
I
also,
think it's this one.
It's the one with discover, explore, and innovate.
Yes, this one.
Yes.
Here you go. Perfect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
we had a question. I'm curious if there have been studies or experience with autistic or other neurodivergent brains in this methodology or system.
Yes, that's such a wonderful question. Thank you. Yes, there absolutely have been studies, and that truthfully is not the area of expertise that I hold. I have many coach friends who focus on both positive intelligence and also neurospicy individuals, and I would love to connect that person if possible.
Thanks, Nori. So yeah, if you would like to connect, you can reach out directly to Dorit and
Please do.
And she can share resources. Thanks, Dorit.
Yeah.
Another question came in. Worry is another reaction that happens for me even as I am able to identify positive possibilities. I experience both. How to focus, especially on the positive possibilities, let go of the negative worries.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And again, it takes practice. So oftentimes we can hold 2 truths. We can hold the positive and we can hold the worry. So one of the bases of positive intelligence that we touched on early on when talking about the neurological origins is mindfulness. Mindfulness brings us back into the present. So when we're worrying about something, we're thinking about the potential outcome of the future. I'm afraid of what might happen. Whereas you being able to hold what's positive is you being present in the moment. Right now, you are safe. Right now, you have calm. And worry is taking us into the future. So a mindfulness practice of reorienting towards the present is how we can hold both, but be with the positive truth that we wish to hold. That might be breathing exercises, somatic exercises, tapping into our sage mindset is a mindfulness practice to bring us back to the here and now. So it's true, you can hold both, but when you want to be in a positive mind space, that's where positive intelligence and the practice of mindfulness brings us back to the calm that we feel here now.
Yeah, thank you, Dorit. All right. Any other questions? Feel free to share or unmute yourself. I really love what you're saying, Dory, is that this is really, it's just an ongoing practice. It's about like reminding ourselves and practicing. It's not just, we're never going to like always be able to be in that zone, but when we can recognize it, we can practice
That's
and
right.
use these tools.
Yeah, that's
Love
right,
that.
Lisa. Thank you. It's true. The plasticity of our brains that I mentioned throughout this session is absolutely true to the end of our life. And these are muscles that we're exercising.
Mhm.
So we go to the gym of our brains and we work on our sage mindset. It's a lifelong practice, and it's beautiful the way that folks that I work with and for me personally have found that the introduction of mindfulness and sage mindset has allowed me to grow. And also, the more we know, the more we know what we don't know. And so it begins this expansive journey of discovering our sage mindset over time. Thank you all.